Hello everyone. So today is March 3rd, Monday, March 3rd. And I just wanted to hop on here on my lunch break. I'm in the car. No, I'm not driving. But I just wanted to hop on the car because it is a little cold outside and it's very windy. So I did not want the audio to be super messed up from the wind. So today I don't really have a solid idea about what I want to talk about, but I figure I want to just shoot the shit and have it go from there. So I did write down some things that I would like to talk about. And so the first thing is a quote that I read somewhere in a book that said, "Love is a heavy thing that carries you as much as you carry it." And I think this quote resonates with me, especially since it is wintertime. And I guess part of life is knowing yourself. And in knowing myself, I would say during the winter times, I get very sad and depressed. I don't know that there's like a name to it, right? You know, my parents could say, "Oh, you have a seasonal affect disorder." But I don't know that there's really a name for it. You know, I think that's just how my body is and how my body functions and how my serotonin levels shift throughout the months that are not a lot of sunlight, right? So I don't know, but it's definitely something out of the ordinary. And I think reflecting back on these last couple of years, I think this would always happen in college as well. But in college, I always had a person to love and a person loving me. And I think once people love you, in my opinion, people loving you is like a free dopamine injection into your soul, right? So even if I was depressed, you know, there are things that can make it better, right? There was this love that I was carrying within me, but also it was carrying me at the same time. And I think the loss of that definitely, you know, kind of made me feel these things in full force, right? Whereas maybe before they were being dampened out, not that they were never there, and not that they were not being addressed, because they for sure were being addressed. They just probably weren't being addressed as much as they could have been, because, you know, I probably didn't feel as bad as I do now, which is okay. I think that's a very normal thing, and I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with no matter what in some capacity. So I'm not too worried, and I'm not too feeling out of the ordinary when I feel these things, because I don't know, it's just something I've been feeling for 5 years now, right? So I don't know, this is just part of growing up. This is part of adulthood. I don't think there's any sort of intervention needed. I don't think there's any sort of medication that's going to fix it. I think this is just part of life. This is how it's going to go, and that's okay. I'm going to figure it out. So another thing that I saw, which this reminds me of the idea of being interlinked with someone, right? I think that's what I want to name this video. It's called Interlinked. So obviously interlinked, from a physical standpoint, is if I have two things and I link them together, right? My fingers are not interlinked. If you want to think about it like Blade Runner, you know, in Blade Runner 2048, he's becoming interlinked with the system, right? His interlinkedness is like removing empathy from himself. So that's like the famous scene where he's like, you know, "I feel no emotion, interlinked," and he says it back, and like that's how it is. But I think there's also an aspect of interlinked in love, personally, for me, right? And I know last video I mentioned the chemical bonding of love. I think part of the chemical bonding, in my opinion, is being interlinked, right? Like, you know, to bring it to organic chemistry terms, which is a little bit nerdy, but if I have a singular bond of carbons, right? I have a carbon-to-carbon bond. Those bonds are interlinked, right? I can have a double bond, which is even stronger, and those are interlinked, right? But they're interlinked even stronger. And then I could have a carbon-to-carbon triple bond, which is the strongest carbon-to-carbon bond that you could get. And those are super, super interlinked. And what's funny, actually, now that I think about that analogy, is when I have a singular bond of carbons, they're this far apart. And as I get a double bond, they're this far apart. But as a triple bond, they're this far apart, right? They get shorter and shorter and shorter, the bonds. But they become more and more interlinked and more stronger. And I think that's a facet for life. And I think that's also an analogy that can be used in relationships and friendships, right? Because I think there's something about being interlinked that's so awesome, right? I remember there are times even now where I don't feel super interlinked to anyone particularly, but there are even times where, maybe it's coincidental, but it's like, I texted this person maybe an hour ago. I haven't thought about it. Then the second I think about it, they text me back, right? Part of that is being interlinked. And I think that's something very special that we can have with people. And I think that's something that we don't get with a lot of people. Because I think as I've grown up, I've realized we don't actually get as many relationships as we think we do, right? I felt like as a kid, I would never get any. Then I felt like as a young adult that I would get an infinite amount. And now I feel like as a full adult that I will get them, but they will be limited. And that's fine, right? You can't love everyone. You can't know everyone. You can't please everyone. And that's okay. But that brings me to my second point of when you see something beautiful in someone, tell them it could stay with them for a lifetime. And I think that's as important because I think telling people what the qualities that you like in them and, telling them that you've noticed the changes that they've been working towards is so important because we as humans sometimes, and me especially, sometimes lose track of progress when we're too enclosed into the echo chamber of the goal we're trying to achieve. And what do I mean by that? So let's say that I really want to run 20 miles. Well, I could be at 18 miles and feel like I'm not doing enough and I'm not good enough to run 20 miles. But in reality, you ran 18. So there's something there that's good, right? There's something there that's very, very positive, that's very good. And it's hard to see that sometimes when you're stuck in the echo chamber because all you can think about is the end. The end, the end, the end. Well, a person outside of the chamber doesn't know what the end is for you. All they see is the progress and the journey. So I think highlighting those things in people and saying, hey man, I really noticed that you've been doing this thing and you've been getting better at this thing. And I think that's awesome. Like that inspires me. I think that sticks with people for a long time, right? Because it makes them feel like a sense of, oh, the things I've accomplished so far are are meaningful. Those are meaningful things. And I think without others telling us these things, it's hard to really know the progress that we've made, right? Obviously, certain things have certain metrics for progression, right? Strength, it's very easy to tell because I get stronger, right? Last week I lifted 30-pound weights. This week I lifted 35-pound weights. You can still get caught up in the goals, in the journey, but for the most part, I think most people's goals are to lift heavy things and lift heavy things consistently and not go down. So as long as they're not going down, they're probably pretty happy with themselves. But I think there are other goals in life about changing yourself, about changing habits, about, being a better person, being a better lover, getting people to even love you in the first place. I think those are things that are hard because they're judged for completion based on the end result, right? So I could say, I want to be a better lover. Well, the end result is you're in love. And if you're not in love, then clearly you're not doing something correctly. But that's not always true, right? So I think every situation is nuanced, and highlighting every single situation and telling people that you notice things in them and that there are beautiful things in them and becoming interlinked with them is so important, right? It's like moving from that single bond to that double bond. Does it seem like a lot? No, but in reality, it's a complete world of difference with completely different properties, with completely different characteristics. Everything about it is completely different, right? The amount of, and I'll say the amount of pressure it takes to break a bond for, let's say, a single bond is 100. Well, for a double bond, it's 150, right? I need more heat. I need even colder temperatures to impact it. And your triple bond, even more so, right? Like my liquidity goes down. All these things happen. And again, I know that's a quite nerdy reference, but I think it actually applies here quite well. Because I think for me, when I look at interlinkedness and I think about what I want in a future partner, and I think about how I want my future partner to be and who I want to date. And, you know, obviously I said in the last video I want to be intentional about dating and all these things. But I think for me, there's almost this feeling of like the next person I have, I want it to be like mindless devotion for each other. Because if it's not that, I don't think I really want it, right? Because I know me and I know what makes me feel better. And I know what makes me feel happy, and I know what makes me feel secure, and I know what, you know, I know what I'm looking for, I'd say. And I don't think I'm looking for a specific person or a specific feature or, you know, whatever. I think I look for specific qualities, right? And I would say a quality a person can have is interlinkedness and willingness to interlink with someone, right? Because I think as I have rewatched the last video about soulmates a few times, a big part of it about choosing someone is the willingness to choose them, right? A lot of people are simply unwilling to choose people, right? For whatever reason, because they're scared, because they just got a relationship, because it's not the time in their life, because they're in a relationship, right? Some people are just unwilling to choose others, and that is okay. But I think a quality in a partner that I want is willingness, right? Willingness to try. And I think that's something that I emphasized in my last relationship is like, look, there's always going to be a reason to not do something. There's always going to be a job. There's always going to be life. There's always going to be busy times. There's always going to be not busy times. There's always going to be some excuse for you to not do something. But you have to have a willingness to want to do it for it to happen, right? And that applies to relationships too. If you don't have the willingness to be with someone, then I guess you just won't be with them. And, you know, it is what it is. And I think some people, in trying to play defense with themselves, kind of permanently shut themselves off and have no willingness to try, and then wake up years later when they're almost 30. I see it all the time. They're 28, 29, 30. They have no one. They have nothing. They don't like themselves. And it's just like, well, did you ever have the willingness to step out of your comfort zone and try something that you were unsure about? Because that tells me probably not. And I know that's off topic, but that's just definitely observations that I made. And I think part of me, you know, wants a person and wants people in my life to be interlinked, right? I would say if you look at like a my cell, for example, which I wish I could include a photo, but I don't know how to. But a my cell, for example. So a my cell is a single point with a bunch of tails on the end, right? And the tails are hydrophilic tails. They love water. They love things. And you have the hydrophobic core, which is basically blocked, right? All of those tails on the micelle, we'll say, are interlinked to the micelle head, the middle of it. That's how I view relationships in my life. If you're unwilling to be interlinked with me, as I am willing to be interlinked with you, then I don't see how we could ever work, right? I don't see a point in having relationships with people who you're not offering each other anything, right? It doesn't quite make sense to me, because for me, I already have to keep the amount of relationships that I have to a numeric minimum, because I know myself and I know that I need to leave a lot of the pie for me. So if a lot of the pie is for me, and that's okay, then I can't give a lot of the pie to others. And I would prefer to not give out little thin slivers to everyone, right? I would prefer to give people, you know, a big piece of my pie if I can, because that's my devotion to them, right? The mind-numbing devotion. That's the devotion I want. And I think part of getting interlinked is the pie no longer is mine, but the pie is ours, right? So that's kind of how I want it to be. I want it to be ours. And I think that's something that doesn't happen easy, doesn't happen often, but I think it can happen. And I think, just to end this video, I think for me, if I can, you know, thinking about March and going back outside and going to more social events and trying to get a girlfriend legitimately, I think if I can love often, love authentically, and love all out, I think I could do it. I think I do. And I mean, this is me speaking this into existence, but I think, you know, in March, I hope to be dating someone, or I hope to be going on dates with someone. I really do. And I know maybe that's an ambitious goal, but I think that's a reasonable goal, right? Like, I hope to be with someone, and I hope that it's amazing, and I hope, you know, I hope that we start to fall in love and become interlinked, and I think that's doable. So, I want to end the video there because I have to get back to work. But, you know, here's to March, here's to 2025, here's to big changes, and here's to hopefully finding someone. Yeah, so that's me clocking out. Time to clock back into the real job. So yeah, I will see everyone in the next.